Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Eden. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with life science companies from across the globe over the past 14 years to help them with everything from virtual advisory boards, online medical education, digital investigator meetings, and since the launch of our award-winning Insight Events platform, we've also been helping pharmaceutical companies with MSL and sales rep training, large corporate events, innovation hackathons, and everything in between. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations with some of the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, and healthcare thought leaders, is we can all work together to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super excited to having one of these thought leaders at the table with me today. This is actually Harry Glorikian. He's actually the global business expert, general partner at Scientia Ventures. He's also the author of a book called The Future You: How Artificial Intelligence Can Help You Get Healthier, Stress Less, and Live Longer. So we're going to delve into that a little bit today. In The Future You, Harry shares life-altering observations on the effect digitalization and innovative technology has had and will be having on our health. He outlines a roadmap to maximize readers' personalized health and wellness, along with clearing the misconceptions that a lot of people have about the use of technology and AI and privacy and all sorts of things like that. Filled with all sorts of practical tools and illustrative stories from experts, his mission is to help everyone reach their best self and educate his readers on the effectiveness of revitalized technology. Welcome, Harry. So happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Natalie, for having me.
Absolutely. I did, take a look at your background. I mean, your LinkedIn profile is burgeoning with sitting on boards and, hundreds and hundreds of things. I think a lot of people would be really interesting, Harry, to have an understanding about your career trajectory and how you landed in the very interesting place that you are today.
Oh God, I wish it was a straight line. A little bit of a, ping pong. But I started my career in pathology many moons ago in an area called what I would call precision medicine, where we were doing immunohistochemistry for breast cancer. And then I had my own lab for a while. I grew that, I sold that. Then I worked for a company called Applied Biosystems, which was the company that did the Human Genome Project, and spun out a company called Celera Genomics. Then after that, I started a strategy consulting firm with a partner, and we grew that and sold that to a private equity fund. Then I got called by GE Ventures, and they said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Thinking about my next gig." And they said, "Come over here. We want you to be an entrepreneur in residence and help us spin up companies from scratch." So I started doing that. And then my partner at the venture fund called me and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm spinning up companies." And he said, "Come over here. We're going to do Fund 3. Join us here." And so couldn't resist and joined the venture fund, and have been investing in companies and helping them grow. And in the meantime, trying to write a few books because I can't help myself, and hosting my podcast and having interesting conversations like you do.
Oh, I love it. What an absolutely fascinating background. And I love what you've been doing. So we could probably spend multiple shows going through each of those different elements because they're all so uniquely different, but somehow we'll probably merge them into this conversation. And I'm sure that you've enveloped a lot of these in the books you've written. So let's actually just maybe start off with the interesting area that you're in right now with Scientia Ventures. Your role as one of the general partners, and kind of what the premise is of that company, and maybe some of the companies that are in your portfolio right now.
Yeah, so we're trying to invest in areas where data and biology would intersect. Now that's a broad statement, only because there's just not enough really good companies in any one vertical yet. We just haven't graduated enough people that can really take these companies to a different level. Now we're starting to, but time has to go on. Everywhere from using technology to advance drug discovery in companies like one of our seed stage investments was 1910 Genetics, to something that would be, say, closer to a patient or interacting with patients, where we have invested in a company called Drumroll, which is utilizing AI and machine learning when interacting with patients to understand what's driving them, and the data insight that you can gain from there. So it's a very broad area that we're invested in. And we're also invested in hardcore drug development in areas like Parkinson's with Enterin, or one of the original investors in Royalty Pharma, which was one of the original royalty pharmaceutical funds. Actually, they're the largest in the world. So it's a wide variety of areas, but we've been migrating more and more towards where data and biology intersect.
Absolutely love it. What a great niche area, and definitely burgeoning. And I'm sure you're seeing all kinds of growth in that area for sure. We are coming out, it's difficult to say because some people are saying we're going in to, out of a global pandemic with the COVID-19, has devastated the world in so many ways. It's been a revolutionary time, and in some ways an accelerant, creating a groundswell of momentum around all things digital. And one of those areas of accelerated change was really around where we were doing clinical trials, but really healthcare in general, around the decentralization of all of that, going away from like central places to go see your physician or to start participating in a trial. We're now seeing a lot of these things happening with mobility in mind, with people's homes being safe and sound. And a lot of that is through, all kinds of things around diagnostics and remote monitoring. Maybe we can talk a little bit, since again, your background in pathology, and also that you wrote a book on commercializing IVDs or in vitro diagnostics. Tell us a little bit about where some of these diagnostics fit into this whole decentralized healthcare ecosystem that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. COVID, there's nothing like a good pandemic to cause a major shift in the way that people, interact or utilize the healthcare system, and how the healthcare system now needs technology tools to actually function. So we've, telemedicine has grown, maybe not as much as we'd like, but a lot of changes have taken place. And you're right, diagnostics, which was not always given the level of attention that I think it deserved historically, really jumped to the top in prominence, especially with COVID testing. And with COVID testing, instruments have been produced that now you can also produce other tests on top of that would be actually at the patient home, or at least near the patient. Now, the issue that I always have is what is the test? What is it saying? What is the information that's going to be actionable to the patient? And of course, the FDA clearance that you may need to get because of the information that's being given to the patient and the therapeutic, path that patient may need to take. Part of me always believes there's going to be some things that will be at home, but I think most of the stuff may be at a clinic nearby. And telemedicine really enables that, because if you do something at a clinic and something shows up, you can actually interact with a physician through a telemedicine platform, say at your local CVS or Walgreens. So I think there's good momentum. It's just thinking about the execution of that to get it to catch and grow the way that the industry would like.
You mentioned that telemedicine is not growing at the speed that we had liked. What do you think we would have liked, and why is it not moving as fast as it should be?
So, before the pandemic, there are these arcane laws on the books, right? Can't do stuff across borders. You can't prescribe. You can't do this. Those are artificial constructs of, sort of states or groups trying to protect their own fiefdoms, right? In a global world, or in a, at least the United States, right? You'd like to see cross-border capabilities. And telemedicine is really one of those areas that can enable that if implemented properly. I think we'd like to see more advancements of not just being able to see someone, but also get their EMR on the right in front of the physician, to have remote technologies that can monitor that patient, so the physician can get real-time information, like from a blood pressure cuff or an ECG. or different types of technologies that would be near the patient. And then maybe an overlay of something like AI or machine learning to highlight different things that the physician may want to be able to act on. But I think what happened was the pandemic happened and everybody said, oh my God, let's hurry up. But you would have liked some of those things available pre-pandemic. And now I feel like we're slipping backwards. People are saying, well, we don't need to go cross state borders anymore, or we don't need to pay for it anymore because the pandemic is finishing. And I think that that's just sliding backwards into the old way we did things, as opposed to modify what was there to, jump into the new world. And I wrote an op-ed on this recently.
Yeah, there's a lot to say there, especially, we're in this interesting world because in some ways we've created, or there's a creation of, healthcare is what I would call a complex problem. When you talk about innovations-based thinking, it's not complicated, it's complex. There's a myriad of things that have to be disentangled and incentivized. The issue is that we have a lot of legacy infrastructure that the pandemic hasn't necessarily changed. And so unless we really look into that, like you said, things are going to fall in from a gravity standpoint to where they were always in the first place. So I think definitely an opportunity for changing some of these. So, when we sort of think about where the opportunities are, I see, for example, you're wearing an Aura ring. We're having opportunities, good for you. So we're seeing, lots of opportunities for biohackers, but just people in general. Now they've seen some of these tools and opportunities with all kinds of phone apps and other sorts of things that are just on their mobile phone that is now sort of democratizing how we're bringing artificial intelligence, this really scary word, into our own personalized lives. So I was actually wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of that concept that you've written in your book, The Future You. What is AI going to be doing for a lot of us now and in the future?
Well, it's interesting, right? I don't think people realize that they're probably interacting with some form of artificial intelligence daily, all right? If they're interacting with Siri, Alexa, or searching for a movie on Netflix, right? They're interacting with some form of artificial intelligence or one of the constructs under it, like machine learning or deep learning, daily. So they just don't realize it, which is great about the technology. You really don't want to see it. You want it just working in the background. But all of these, sensors and technologies that are coming to the forefront, as you say, are actually creating the opportunity for an individual to have their own personalized dashboard for themselves, where instead of waiting for that silent killer, right, to sneak up on them, you can see it when it's coming. Like, I have a wireless blood pressure cuff here, and one of the big killers is your blood pressure slowly going up. You may not realize it until you go to that doctor's appointment, maybe once a year, and oh my God, it gets detected, and then you're on blood pressure medication, which maybe good or maybe bad, right, because of all the side effects. So, but if you could see it along the way, maybe you could make a slight modification. There's been numerous articles about the Apple Watch detecting a heart condition potentially, or something like this Cardia device, which is $80, doing a 6-parameter view of your heart, and then using AI to sort of interrogate it and give you that early warning nudge that you may want to make a change in your lifestyle or talk to your physician about this. And sort of it is empowering to the patient that we no longer have to only depend on that one-time visit. Because I always tell people it's like taking your car in. It's making the noise, but it's not making the noise right when you're at the mechanic. And so difficult to diagnose. These technologies can monitor you 24/7. And so you will see something potentially happening in that time frame that then a physician can act upon.
I think it's really interesting. One of the biggest cost infringements on healthcare, a lot of these chronic diseases. things like we consider metabolic, disorder, which is an array of different disorders, cardiometabolic, diabetes, even Alzheimer's is being considered as part of this metabolic syndrome. And, even things like cancer and rare disorders, things that we might be able to find ways to get those early signs, the early diagnosis. But as you've mentioned earlier, even some of the infrastructure, the legacy infrastructure around cross-border healthcare, and is there still some old mindset that we have as people where we're socialized to believe in reactive sick care and not so much proactive well care? How do these devices, or how can these devices help us? And what else do we need to do to ensure that we can create a society that is geared towards preempting their health?
Well, the system itself is sort of, the way that it pays for care is somewhat perverse, right? It's sort of backwards. It pays for what you do, not necessarily outcomes, although we are migrating in that direction, but I think we need to push harder. And then when you push for outcomes, you're actually paying for performance. Well, the only way that you get optimal performance is by measuring. And so these technologies will be adopted more. For the average individual, I think it's most of it is just education of, they may not be aware that these capabilities are available. These blood pressure cuffs now, I mean, if you go to CVS or Walgreens, they're like $40, right? The prices are coming down over time. That, this Cardia device I told you is like, I think it's $80. I mean, technologies that are available to patients to monitor themselves. I always say, like, if you're younger, it sort of keeps you healthier longer, right? If you're in that middle age, it might stave off conditions that are sneaking up on you so that you can see them coming. And then if you have a chronic condition, it can actually help you monitor that chronic condition much more, from a well-managed perspective, because you have the data to make those changes that you can make over time to keep yourself healthier.
And I think in this world of social media, it also exposes individuals sort of as the Lone Ranger with a rare disorder, with potentially a community that's global. So even just that social support could also potentially have an impact on your outcomes too, as a potential. So interesting to note that. I know that you mentioned earlier, Harry, about some of the work that you did around personalized medicine. Sort of, I oftentimes call it the N=1, which you were calling is, now we've got these personal dashboards and this ability to start tracking yourself. I was actually just wondering what your thoughts are on how these devices, how artificial intelligence is going to, create, this platform, if you will, for real personalized individual medicine.
So, from an individual perspective, it's, right now we're looking at individual biomarkers. In other words, you have one app for blood pressure, you have one app for, say, the cardia, and you need to sort of put the pieces together yourself. I think the next level is going to be apps that will, or technologies that will help bring them together, and then be able to look at them, as a whole, so that you can see where you are. I think from the medical establishment, we're just starting to see them integrate the data from these into a patient's EMR. And then we're going to have to see, artificial intelligence sort of be able to make sense of it for the physician, so it's actionable when, say, something looks like it's headed in the wrong direction. But we're seeing it integrated into different medical systems, and it is making a difference for different patient populations, helping alert the physician or the nurses that there is an issue and that we should, take care of this patient first, because their situation is becoming more acute.
Absolutely. It's been a while since companies like 23andMe. There's a whole slew of these companies that sort of do, gene, analyses. But now we're actually going into much deeper areas around next generation sequencing, gene editing, and also this whole science around pharmacogenetics. I'm wondering if you can actually speak to this whole new realm and how this is potentially going to impact everything from clinical trial, new entity identification and development, to the way we actually personalize the way we manage our own health.
So huge subject. But I mean, I remember, I feel like I'm getting old now, but I remember when someone said to me, why would you want to sequence anything? Right. And now it seems like we want to sequence everything. And it has a profound impact on, everything that most people don't even realize. Like, I mean, if it wasn't for the speed of sequencing, I don't think we would have had the vaccine for COVID as quickly as we did. But you can see how it's making a difference in drug discovery, drug development. A number of therapeutics now require that you have a certain genetic sequence to get that prescription. So we're getting to a point where I used to be able to know all of them. Now it is impossible to know all of them. I need to look it up, right, to see if there's one available and how it matches with a potential drug that's out there. And so it's almost requiring all physicians that are, especially in oncology, to interact with, computer systems to be able to understand what's the gene sequence and is there a drug available, and how do I get it to that patient? Is it reimbursed, et cetera? And we're already seeing tests where you would be able to do a blood test, like from a company like Guardant, or companies like Grail that are coming on board, where you would be able to do a simple blood test and be able to potentially detect how your therapy is working for areas like colorectal cancer, or they're starting to migrate into, can I detect that cancer earlier? And those may be, I mean, I imagine a day when we'll all go in for our yearly blood test and you'll be able to find some of these diseases, hopefully most of these diseases, earlier. And we're very good at treating people earlier than treating people later.
100%. You bring up a word that might kind of get people's to, kind of cringe a little bit when you use the word blood test, especially under the scepter of, the whole scenario with Theranos and the Elizabeth Holmes trial, and, the promise of these great tests, these blood tests, and especially around diagnostics. How do you feel that some of these new biotech, these new startups, how do they get past some of that concern and bias?
Well, it is unfortunate that that company got that far. I mean, they should have asked somebody in the industry, which I don't understand how they didn't if you're putting that much money to work. But I remember the first time somebody showed it to me, I was like, that's not going to work. Just knowing the technology. But I think most companies will hopefully do the right thing. I mean, publish their results, in peer-reviewed journals, do the right clinical trials. And many of the companies that I would refer to have extensive clinical trials and have done the work to prove that their technology does what it does, and hold it up to the right FDA level of scrutiny to make sure that patients are actually getting what they want. When things are not approved, I get a little uncomfortable depending on who's doing the assay and how it's being done, et cetera. So I think that things need to be held up to a certain level of scrutiny. And then they need to be compensated for the value that they're providing, which usually doesn't happen. And they need to be actionable. So, all of those variables are things that I look into when I'm talking to a company that's working in the space.
100% due diligence is very important. It's amazing I completely agree how that one went past a lot of people's heads. It really does say a lot about spin and how people can get stuck in a flurry. So it's a sort of a warning to all of us on that. You have predecessors to you, like the Eric Topels of the world, who's written a lot on digital medicine. You actually have written also a really important book on, called Moneyball Medicine. And so maybe you can even just talk about the word Moneyball in the example of the movie or the book, and the whole idea around where data fits in. So can you explain a little bit about what you mean by Moneyball medicine?
Yeah, I was trying to communicate sort of an idea to people that, the data can help you optimize how you manage a patient. The data can give you insight into maybe a more accurate diagnosis. Maybe the data can give you, this therapy would be the ideal one for this patient. And then giving patient, the industry insight of like what's happening in drug discovery, as well as from managing the patient managing themselves, and the data that they can then have on their own side that then they can go talk to their physician with. So Moneyball was the predecessor to the Future You. It's more written for industry individuals. My wife was like, "You definitely didn't write this for me." So the Future You is actually written for everybody. I got convinced to make it more accessible, which was challenge, I must admit, because I'm used to talking in the acronyms we're used to, and I had to explain all of that in the book. But wanted to make it. I realized that the industry is not moving as fast as it could. Maybe if we informed the patients or the average person, they might demand it more or start incorporating it into their lifetime, into their life, and make a change. And I've been pleased with at least the reviews that have been coming back so far. A lot of people have been incorporating at least one of the changes into their lives, and it seems to be making a difference for them, which I can't ask for more than that.
I love it. That's absolutely brilliant. One thing that really comes to mind as we think about Moneyball, we obviously think about using stats and data and information to, really build on success, success for patients, success for healthcare facilities, employers, payers, et cetera. The question always comes down to this idea. We have data everywhere now. Data is the new oil. It's the gold, but it's everywhere and it's unrefined. So we've got these unrefined, these oil bursts everywhere, and we don't know what to do with it. You're, I think, referred to it as data fire hoses, or, and what do we do with all these digital devices and information? Are we asking physicians to be statisticians or data and, analyzers? Like, what are we doing with all this information?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, the EMRs are not exactly designed to manage a patient. They were, if you look at it, it was a billing system, not how do I optimize care for a patient. Now, I know many of them are trying to fix that. Sometimes I think you have to pull it out from the root and start from scratch. But right now, even interoperability is challenging, right? So how do you get that data in one place so that you can do that next level analysis? And I am seeing companies that are coming up that are taking that data and helping clean it up and then producing results. And they're choosing particular silos because you can't take on the whole beast at one time. But I also think that consumer companies are really not far behind, right? Where they're pushing right up against that envelope of collecting that data, making it interpretable, as long as they're not making a medical claim. But they have a lot of data that makes that, crossing over, depending on the condition, not a tremendous leap. So my expectation is that we're going to see the biggest changes come from the consumer electronic companies upon the healthcare system, as opposed to the healthcare system being able to make that change themselves. And my biggest fear is the payment system and the existing EMR systems may cause breakage in the healthcare system because they can't keep up with the changes that are happening on the consumer side.
Using the word breakage is an important point, because there's also some other perspective based on some of the world events that are happening with us today, sort of the Ukraine-Russia, war that's happening. A lot of concerns about supply chains, some of the cybersecurity issues that we're seeing happening all over the world, but even recently, within hospital environments and healthcare ecosystems. When you use the word break, this actually causes a lot of people to be concerned around interoperability, data sharing, and just kind of wanting to keep all of these, almost kind of reverting back to paper. What do we do in this situation when we've got this push-pull happening with innovation and propagation of creativity and, and artificial intelligence. But then we have the pull side of people wanting to go back to basics to where we originally came from.
Well, if you really think about it, right? I mean, the banking system is evolving very quickly, right? I mean, I have had the chance to interact with the CEO of Bank of America, and the things they're doing are revolutionary. Yet my money is secure, right? I don't think about, oh my God, is my bank account going to get hacked? I mean, I do. You should have the right passwords, et cetera. But I'm not worried about that. And when I go across the world, I stick my ATM and I get my data out, right? Or my money out. Healthcare wasn't designed as, the banking system was from a security perspective. So we're overlaying all that on top of it now, right? Or have been. Interoperability has been just a resistance on the part of the vendors and the systems, not because patients, didn't demand it. So I think, again, rethink needs to be done about the existing systems, how to keep them secure. There are a number of companies coming out with encryption technologies that will allow for sharing of data where it's much more secure. And we've been looking at a few of them from an investment perspective to enable that capability. But I really think the existing system needs to rethink how it's doing what it's doing and the tools that they're using, rather than spending billions of dollars putting an EMR in that really isn't going to advance them to where they really need to get to.
We've seen a lot of things happen during the pandemic. And I think it's been really interesting because I think it's given us a global scorecard about how we're doing and faring in all sorts of dimensions in society, including healthcare. And one of the illustrations was really around disparity in health and access to technology. So technology could be your smartwatch, it could be the blood pressure band that you were just talking about, or it could be a COVID-19 vaccine. What do we say in this time in society where there's a disparity in populations, in wealth, in approach, to be able to keep sort of a standard in what the value of a human life is? And do we have anything to say about that as as Americans, as Canadians, as people living in a higher income world?
So I mean, I'm hopeful. I guess in the business, I mean, I have to be. But if you look at technology and you look at the deflationary effect of technology, it's profound. Where every time I get a new iPhone, right, it does more every year for the same price or less. The watch does more for the same price or less. And then prices come down. I mean, I think the original one of this blood pressure cuff was maybe $180. And like I said, now I can go get one for $40. So I am hopeful that the, inflationary change that technology causes will make it deflationary and allow that technology to be available to more people. The other thing is, because of AI and these sorts of things, it enables you to change the business model where I may not need a big, heavy piece of equipment anymore. I may be able to do it on a much smaller piece of equipment, and I may be able to do it in a distributed fashion that allows that technology to be available anywhere in the world to a patient. And then finally, I go back to the payment system. If you pay people based on performance or outcomes, they really are going to want to monitor patients, keep them healthier, because it's more profitable to keep somebody healthier than wait till they get sick and manage them then. So I think it's a combination of the two that we're going to see. And if the system doesn't migrate to an outcomes-based and adopt technology properly, I think you're going to see other companies start to introduce modified business models that would then force the change upon the system itself.
On that point about incentivization, which quite frankly is a really important carrot, if you will, in the whole, innovation, systems thinking, and, helping to untangle a lot of these complex systems, is putting the right incentives in place. And one of them is really the incentivization of the way physicians treat Do you see a day, or are there any examples out there of incentivizing based on preventative, not just medications that and their outcomes, and then payers reimbursing pharmaceutical companies, through HTAs and health technology assessments, but really the way physicians are treating and monitoring in a much more proactive way? What are we seeing anything in the world with this?
Yeah, I mean, when I when I talk to my physician, I mean, it's happening. It's not exactly happening in the smoothest way possible. I think they're being overwhelmed, and it's sort of being, the way it's being implemented, I think, is not working for a lot of these physicians and causing a lot of stress. Like, here are the 35 things I need to look at, right, when I'm managing this patient. And if I'm deficient on any one of these, I'm going to get dinged, right? And so, not optimal. We are seeing Medicare and Medicaid move towards outcome-based payments, and they're the 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? If they move to a outcomes-based, everybody else will slowly follow. I don't see the middleman insurance companies. I know they talk about it, but in reality, there's the economic dynamics are not set up for them to make that move, right? It's not exactly set up for them to have an outcomes-based system. The ones that really make the biggest moves are self-insured medical centers like Geisinger or Intermountain Health, where when they make a change, they actually can see the impact to their bottom line. So if you think about a corporation, I make an investment, I would like to see the benefit of that investment. If I'm insured by a third party, I'm going to make the investment, but I'm not going to see the benefit of it. They will. So the system has to change to cause that biggest shift. Otherwise, I had one CEO of a hospital say to me, we can actually do the analytics to figure out, who's moving towards heart failure, but I don't get reimbursed for that. I was like, that's not, something is wrong.
Insane. Yeah, no, there's something seriously wrong. When we talk about legacy structure, I mean, you can dismantle all of these pieces, actually, Harry. And one of them really has to do with even the payment systems. Maybe there's a possibility that there could be a complete overhaul, like a grassroots movement, almost like when you think about a forest fire, and then you see the phoenix coming from the ashes. There'll be brand new things. For example, there could be, like based on blockchain or what have you, there could be crowdsourced insurance based on people with specific parameters or certain health conditions. They all invest in their own insurance and they all have equal health. And, and maybe these are like little groups. I'm just wondering, like, our complete rethinking of payment in healthcare.
I think there's a number of experiments that are, being done. There are a number of venture companies that are investing in these companies that are trying to come at the system a little bit differently. But wow, you would need a sea change in Washington, right? The ability to see that health is an economic issue, not just a social issue, that when you have a healthy population, your economy actually does, grows and does well because those people are at work and they're not sick and it's not costing your system, costing the system so much money. But that's not how Washington right now is oriented, unfortunately. And so I think if you're going to see some of these sea changes, you really have to have a mindset change. But even then, wow, the economic impact to everybody in the system, you need to think about how that's going to impact everybody, because you can't just flip a light switch and change everything.
I think it's really slow, but I mean, when we think about the other pieces that are huge money saps are, just healthcare institutions. When we think about people going there, and again, we're talking about, a centralized place where things are happening, and there'll always be that need. But as we start thinking about decentralization, we start to see a lot more about the needs for healthcare in the home. We're talking about there's a bed in every home. We're having these ambient biometric sensors in the home, facial recognition, all kinds of things that are happening. You have these Uber type of people who are coming to homes anyway, is that potentially they could be trained to do, various healthcare things. There's an interesting way to look at this. And you're almost wondering if there's like little mini communities, almost like smart cities, or that, some of these experiments can happen, but kind of getting away from these centralized hospitals and looking at decentralized care. Is this part of some sci-fi movie, or is there anything in that could remotely happen?
No. I mean, my biggest level of excitement a lot of times is what's happening on that side is these technologies are becoming better, cheaper, faster, easier, et cetera, right? That are empowering individuals to manage their own health or give them insight into their own health and wellness, right? So you wouldn't drive a car without a dashboard, right? But we're using this vehicle every day and we have no insight into it. Like, something just as simple as, it's not simple, but monitoring your sleep, right? And how do you optimize that? Because if you don't sleep well, things start to break down over time. I always tell people, like, when we torture somebody, we, take away sleep, right? If we optimize sleep, the person has more energy, they have more clarity, the repair systems of the body work better, et cetera. So it could be something just as, a single area like sleep where somebody can optimize and see a big difference in their performance. I mean, I try to do that for myself because I don't like it when I'm tired the next day. It could be walking those few extra steps. I mean, I have an app on my phone called Humanity, which will sort of calculate my rate of aging. And I can see that when I exercise and I walk, it sort of starts to go in reverse, which is really nice incentive. I haven't been able to make it go all the way back, but there are those sorts of things that sort of really push the needle. And I really do see, the consumer world or the healthcare world like this, this Whoop band or, the Apple Watch or technologies like that, really starting to push down on the system, empowering patients to manage their health better and therefore keep themselves healthier longer. And, if it's not going to happen from the system, you're right. There's a grassroots change that will happen because people will be empowered, and that will cause a change in the system itself.
Absolutely. So absolutely essential. Fantastic conversation, Harry. There is so much to talk about in this area. I'm excited. There's a lot of obstacles, but certainly it's never stopped progress from happening. So super excited. If anybody who's listening to the show is interested in connecting with Harry, talking, investing, partnering, please look for his information in the show notes below. So we highly encourage that. Check out impetusdigital.com if you're interested in getting collaborators, physicians, payers, allied healthcare providers, patients. We work with pharmaceutical companies and these folks in asynchronous and synchronous touch points to solve problems, create innovation, deal with interesting new strategies and tactics for your brands and for your company. Check out impetusdigital.com. Please like and subscribe to this channel. We'd also really like if you can leave us some feedback on iTunes. And thank you everybody for your time. And Harry, thank you for a wonderful conversation today.